So, Julio, why is it that the happiest nations in the world are democratic socialist countries? Check it out. Your comments, and don't forget to subscribe, please. On the line with us is Julio Rivera, the writer for Reactionary Times, columnist with Newsmax, The American Thinker, townhall.com. ReactionaryTimes.com is his website. His Twitter handle is Oh Yeah, It's Julio. And Julio, welcome back to the program.
Hey, thank you for having me, Tom.
So we got this this ranking of the happiest countries in the World Happiness Ranking for 2016 through 2018 for the last 3 years. And the happiest country in the world is Finland, #1, followed by Denmark, #2, then Norway, Iceland, the Netherlands, Switzerland, Sweden, New Zealand, Canada, Austria, Australia, Costa Rica, Israel, Luxembourg, United Kingdom, Ireland, Germany, and Belgium, the top 18. And then the 19th is the United States. What those top 18 all have in common is that they are all democratic socialist countries, or they all practice what they refer to as social democracy. And 3 of those countries have a higher percentage of refugees among their population than we do here in the United States. So is it time, Julio, for us to become happy, to put happiness as our highest value rather than, quote, you know, the freedom to die like a dog in the ditch because you're lacking health care or housing or employment? You know, the thing that Ron Paul said back in 2011, I believe it was, during the Republican primaries, when he said that, if somebody is dying in front of a hospital because they can't afford to get health care, that's a measure of, that shows how free we are.
Well, you know, first off, Tom, let me just preface this by saying those Scandinavian countries, they all live by these unwritten rules of what they call janteloven. I don't know if you're familiar with that. It was basically, the writings of, I guess, Axel Sandemos, and the mentality that people possess in these countries. They have basically what they refer to as like the 10 Commandments of Janty. Basically, these people are taught that you're not to think that you're anything special. You're not to think that you're as good as we are. You're not to think that you're smarter than we are. These people, they look down in these countries. They look down on people that try to be exceptional.
Julio, Julio, you've never lived in any of these countries. I lived for a year in Germany, which is one of these countries. It's number 17, and I can tell you that that's not the case. They're obsessive about achievement, and I believe that to be the case.
No, they're actually not. They're actually not.
And that's not the case in Costa Rica. That's not the case in Israel. It's not the case in the United Kingdom. They all score higher than us. It's not the case in Ireland. The only thing that I can see in common between these countries, because they literally, Australia is another whole continent, right? The only thing I can see in common among all of them is that they all practice democratic socialism. They all have basically free college education and free health care.
Okay, but why are these countries swinging to the right? I mean, look at in Denmark, right? You had Lars Rasmussen winning a victory for the Conservative Party in 2015. In Sweden, in 2018, the Swedish Democrats didn't do that well. The far right is rising in Sweden.
But be careful what you're praising here, because the right that is rising in many of these countries, and this is happening all over the world, in large part because of these massive refugee crises that are caused by global warming. All these refugees out of the Middle East that came out of the Arab Spring.
Being caused by global warming. First off, that's ridiculous.
No, it absolutely is. The Arab Spring was caused by, farmers, hundreds of thousands of square miles of farmland were wiped out over the last 20 years as a consequence of the desert moving south. It moved south about 100 miles in Syria, which displaced over 1 million farmers, and they all end up in Damascus. And that fed the Arab Spring, and then the Arab Spring produced the refugee crisis along with our involvement in Libya, and then that refugee crisis spilled into Europe, and now you've got European politicians saying, oh my God, Muslims and brown people are coming into our countries, and those are the people who you're referring to as a swing to the right. But the Europeans are not saying we don't want our health care system or we don't want free education.
Their healthcare system sucks, Tom. Let's face it. I mean, European healthcare is terrible.
Then why do they have lower maternal death rates than we do in the United States? Why do they have lower infant mortality rates than we do in the United States? Why do they have longer lifespans than we do in the United States?
Well, I mean, I think a lot of it has to do with just the population in general. I mean, we have a larger population here. There's a lot of different factors. You can't just across the board say that their system is better. That is actually
I actually
unproven.
can. I just
There's
did.
a lot of people. Listen, I know people that live in Europe. Okay, I have a lot of associates that are in Europe. If you want to go see the doctor, people throw their hands up and give up down there because it just takes too long to be seen.
Julio, it's just not. I'm sorry, it's just not the case.
The one thing I will give them, and this is probably going to run contrary to what people would expect me to say, but the one good thing is that their pharmaceuticals are a lot cheaper than they are in this country, and we do need to reform,
Well, not only that, Julio, if your concern
America
is how long it takes to see a doctor, try seeing a doctor in the United States. When Louise and I first moved to Washington, D.C., and she needed to get, takes a thyroid medication, and she had to get her prescription refilled. And she spent like 3 days calling every doctor in D.C. trying to get an appointment. And the earliest she could get was 6 months out.
Well, my daughter got diagnosed with Graves' disease. She has a thyroid disorder, too, and she was seen the same day. And she has no problem.
Well, good. I'm glad you've got a good doctor, and maybe that was but the fact of the matter is, every American can tell you stories about trying to see a doctor, trying to see a specialist, or trying to get a procedure, and being told, sorry, you're going to have to wait 2 days, or 2 weeks, you're going to have to wait 2 months. That is a common thing in the United States. It is not that common, frankly, in Europe. And I'm telling you, I lived in Europe for a year.
What's the problem then in Venezuela then?
Well, Venezuela is not one of the happiest countries in the world. Venezuela is pretty miserable.
No, it's not. It's absolutely not.
And Venezuela is not a democratic socialist country. Venezuela was more of a true socialist country, and that's a complete red herring, Julio.
It's all the same thing.
No, it's not all the same thing. I'm talking about democratic socialism.
The only way that you could enforce having a state that large, having a government that large that takes care of everything, is to eventually rule by force. This is an eventuality that the Scandinavians have seen and have become smart enough to start electing right-leaning politicians and changing their policies because.
So let me get this straight. You're suggesting, and I understand why the Koch brothers would say this because they're billionaires, but I don't understand why you would say that if we tax our businesses and if we tax our rich people enough that we can all have free education for our kids and free health care for all of us, that somehow that is the tyranny of government that's being forced upon us? Is that your argument?
No, but my argument is that, first of all, there is no such thing as free. So take that out of your vocabulary. None of this stuff is free. In fact, allowing the government into private education is the reason why tuition rates have risen exponentially and the reason why American students are, have these massive education debt.
Yeah, we should absolutely do away with these for-profit schools and colleges. I'm with you on that, but I still don't understand how having society bear the cost. Let me rephrase this: how having society bear the cost of health care and education is tyranny. I don't understand that.
Having society bear how that's tyranny because. It should be, opt-in if you wish. There's some people that may not. Because, people could, if you're generally healthy, listen, first off, America is one of the most unhealthy countries in the world. Our obesity rates, and a lot of that it's obviously disgusting. It's going to cause the cost of health care to rise. And there's another elephant in the room.
Well, here's the thing, Julio. No, let me just respond to what you just said, if I may. Please. Yes, we've got a higher obesity rate in the United States than probably any of these other countries. And the reason why is because all these other countries have a national health care system where the government and the people as a society are invested in the idea of having everybody be healthy. Denmark went so far as to close, we did our show for 2 weeks from their capital city. It was at Copenhagen, I believe. They shut down a bunch of streets for bikes. Literally half the people in the capital city of Denmark bike to work. And this is the result of a government initiative to try and make people healthier so that they wouldn't spend as much on health care. Now, we don't do that here because we're not paying for the health care. Individuals are paying for it.
We actually are, because you know what? If you can't afford health care in this country, you're offered a subsidy.
No, we as a society. Well, yeah, okay, then we as a society.
We already have nationalized health care in a sense. We really do, because
it's called the Veterans Administration.
If I can't afford health care, I can apply for nationalized health care, or the version of it that we have here in our country right now, and I would receive a subsidy. I would pay nothing into the system, and I can go on with pre-existing conditions. I can be a diabetic. I can have cancer. I can have all these things.
And you think that's a bad thing?
Well, no, but what I'm saying is we could have a much better system if we applied choice to our system. The way that
we should get rid of Medicaid. Is that what you're saying? Because the program you're talking about is Medicaid for low-income people. We should just get rid of it?
No, we should reform it to the point where anybody who's able to work is at least contributing something into the system. This is something that Donald Trump talked about.
Well, the vast majority of people on Medicaid are working. It's the program that subsidizes. That's why we say it's the subsidy for Walmart. It's, and McDonald's and all these other low-paying jobs. Those people who work those low-paying jobs are on Medicaid.
Yeah, but there's a lot of people who don't do anything and are totally subsidized by the taxpayer, and that's a problem in this country.
I strongly disagree. I think the number of people who are actually, quote, making a living, end quote, being on the dole is so insignificant, so inconsequential.
No, it's not insignificant because it happens in the larger populated cities in our country. Listen, Tom, you can't tell me because I literally grew up in the ghetto. I've seen people who have made, living off of the dole.
Then Julio, let's make the government the employer of last resort and make, like FDR said, I don't want to give money to people, I want to give jobs to people. Why don't you do that? Why don't you support the Green New Deal?